So, what I need to know is, how do I wrap your husband around my finger so that he'll do what I say? Welcome to LauraKBuzz Will Be on My Brother and Me. Episode 4. A creation of Stupid Ideas That Really Shouldn't Work Productions. So, at this point, we're roughly a month into my quest to get onto an episode of My Brother and Me, and so far, we've had minimal success. We've learnt some new skills, we've come up with a list of reasons why we're a good applicant to be on the show, but we need a heavy hitter. We need something that demands my presence on My Brother and Me. We need a star witness to help us make our case. And this week, I managed to find that star witness. Almost exactly 2 years ago, on the 30th of June 2017, I guested on an episode of Sawbones. Now, we mentioned this podcast in the first episode of LauraKBuzz Will Be on My Brother and Me. Sawbones is a medical advice podcast hosted by Justin and Sydnee McElroy. Sydnee McElroy is an actual doctor and knows a lot about doctory things. And Justin McElroy is her husband and says silly goofs. I was invited to guest on Sawbones to talk about trans issues, to talk about trans healthcare and what it's like to go through the medical system as a trans person. Now, 2 years later, with my first book about being trans about to release in about a week, maybe a little more, it seemed only fitting that I go back to the start and reach out to the first McElroy who I podcasted with. No, I did not reach out to Justin McElroy. I reached out to Sydnee McElroy about guesting on LauraKBuzz Will Be on My Brother and Me. I didn't think the idea would work. I mean, nobody wants to be invited on a podcast to talk about how to get onto someone else's podcast, but amazingly, Sydnee agreed to guest with us. Hooray! Welcome! We have our first big guest on LauraKBuzz Will Be on My Brother and Me. Could you introduce yourself, mysterious person on the call?
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm Sydnee McElroy. I'm Justin's wife.
Well, you're other things as well. What do you do on the internet?
On the internet, I co-host our podcast Sawbones with Justin about medical history, silly medical history stuff. And I also co-host a podcast with my two sisters called Still Buffering about the teenage experience then and now. And then I'm a doctor and a mom in my spare time.
just those side activities.
Yes, exactly. So I don't get bored.
So I brought you on the show because I've been on Sawbones before. I had a bit of a connection and an in point. So
yes, thank you. By the way, that was wonderful to have you on.
Well, I need your help because I want to get myself on My Brother and Me, and I thought, what better chance do I have than grilling you on basically how do I make your husband let me be on the show? Like how do I wrap him around my finger and make him do what I need him to do?
Well, I hope I have answers for that. I think I do. We've been married for 13 years, so I should know by now.
So what is my first move on this? Like, do I brute force it? Do I just spam him with messages, or like how do I go about this?
So let's see. The way that I guess the best thing I can advise based on is that I got Justin to do a podcast with me. And I know a lot of stuff he doesn't, and I'm sure that won't be a problem because if you've listened to their show, you know that they're not really experts on anything. So, I'm sure there's lots of stuff that they don't. That's a good in.
Yeah, I spent the first couple of weeks of this show basically trying to teach myself new skills, like learn a musical instrument. I learnt the kazoo. It's a nice, easy one. Like, I'm pretty confident that I at this point know some things. How else did you get him to do a podcast with you? Is there any other secrets I need to know?
Uh, Justin is very susceptible to guilt. So this is always a good angle. I hate to show all my cards, but not only in our podcast, I guess, business relationship, but in our actual married relationship, guilt works like 99% of the time. I just have to kind of give him a, well, okay, I'll figure something out. Don't worry about it. I understand. I understand. What you do is really important, and you've got to prioritize things, and I understand.
How about I give him one of these? I give him a. Oh, it's okay. I know that I told everyone I would be on my brother and me, and it's fine. I'll just go back and tell them that I was wrong and that I failed. They'll understand. How about one of those? Is that?
Yes, that is it. That not only would that work on Justin, that would probably work on all three McElroys. They are all quite susceptible to guilt.
Oh goodness! So I just need to give them all the same spiel of no, poor me. I confidently said I would do a thing without asking you, and now it's your fault that I'm not on there.
That's exactly the angle, and I'll tell you. Then I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, but it's because the reason I know this works so well is observing Clint. Because he doesn't deploy the guilt card often, but when he does, it is quite effective, and on all three of them. And so I've just adopted that practice.
So on the more elaborate end of getting onto podcasts, do you think it helps that you live in the same house as him? Like, is that a tactic I need to take up? Do I need to go move in?
I mean, we've got a spare bedroom. You're welcome to. It's just sitting there. I think that probably helps because then I can force him to, hey, we're gonna go record, and I can actually like take him by the arm and take him to the studio and say we're gonna sit down and record now.
Okay, so the backup plan is I just go stay in your spare room for a bit, and whenever it's time for MBMBAM to record, I just sort of walk into the room. I'm like, no, I'm here now.
I think that'll work. That would. I mean, the other thing too is, for all three of them, this is probably a little more true for Travis than Justin, but for all three of them, the idea of getting like just more airtime, more time on a podcast, more time to talk. I mean, they love that. Come on, record. It's time to do your podcast. People will listen to it and then love you. They all love that.
Exactly. Right. Have you got any final tips for me before we finish up on how I can make this happen?
I mean, I don't want to say that I can make my husband do things. I'm not going to say that. That's not the kind of relationship we have. But I can make him do things.
Well.
So, listen, I'm your in. If all else fails, I'll just say, hey, you're going to do this because I told you to. And you love me very much.
Okay, so the plan as it stands right now is send guilty messages to all three of them being very, very sad that my plan to get onto their podcast failed. Mm-hmm. If that doesn't work, I'll fly over, stay in your spare room, and just walk in when they're recording. If that doesn't work, I will just shout, Sydnee!
There you go.
Let you fix it.
I am plan C, and I don't think you need that plan. This is like your last fail proof backup of backup of backup. And I don't think you need me, but just in case, keep me in your back pocket.
Wonderful. So yeah, for anyone who hasn't listened to your stuff before, again, what are the things you do on the internet?
So I do Sawbones, which is a medical history podcast with Justin, where I talk about medical history and he makes jokes about it. And Sawbones, you can find that anywhere you find podcasts. It's free. And Still Buffering as well, a teen podcast with one of my sisters is a teen. That's kind of the whole thing. And then the other two of us aren't. And she tells us about teens now, and we tell her about teens then. And they're both, free wherever podcasts are sold, but also part of the Maximum Fun network of shows.
Wonderful. I will drop you a message when I get to yours so I can sneak into the spare room. Thank you for joining me.
Excellent. Thank you.
So, with my guilt-pleading messages emailed off and my flight tickets booked, I set forth for the United States and a spare bedroom that would hopefully be my base of operations.